Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MakerDAO Scientific Governance and Risk Meeting number 169. My name is Long for Wisdom. I'm one of the governance facilitators at MakerDAO, and I'm chairing this meeting today. So as usual, we've got our agenda to get through. I'm going to have a bit of a governance roundup, see what's happened in the last week or so. We've got then some discussions. I think today we're going to talk about CU operations and about the Gelato Uni v3 DAI USDC pool. So just general rules for the call. We kind of like to hear from people, so please do speak up. Try not to speak over anyone, obviously. But yeah, we like to hear from you. So yeah, with that, maybe we can get going. Yes, you can use the reaction store to raise your hand if you want to talk as well. Okay, cool. So updates on votes over the last week. Cool. So we had 4 weekly polls go up last week. The first was increasing the Aave DAI direct deposit module maximum debt ceiling by 50 million from 50 million to 100 million. This passed. Adding a GUSD PSM flexibility module. This also passed. Adding a WBTC C vault type, so similar to ETH with a higher collateralization ratio but a lower stability fee, which also passed, and increasing the system surplus buffer. So this was a ranked poll. The winning option was to increase the surplus buffer to 90 million at a rate of 1 million per week. So we ensure that we can still do some burns at the same time, or hopefully anyway. We also finished, I believe, 8 stratification polls. So we're going to see some more details from Pablo in the MIPs section, so we'll get to that in a little bit. And we also have 2 green light polls still open for SB, FROGI, Solid Block, and Monetalis. All right, let's move on. Cool, so executive proposals. Last week's executive passed and executed. There's a bunch of stuff in WBTCB, some stability fee changes on WBTC, local liquidation limit changes, covenants for P1 drop changes, off-boarded some collaterals. We'll have another executive up for vote tomorrow. This will include the results of the polls that passed this week. So that's WBTC, PSM GUSD A, surplus buffer changes, Aave D3M changes, and it'll also include the core units budget distributions for our new core units. All right, let's move on. Cool, so that brings us to MIPS. Pablo.
Hey.
MIP update.
Hey, Deb. Hello, everyone. Pablo here with a MIPS update. So the ratification polls closed on Monday and all the 8 proposals passed, and we're going to take a quick look at the vote outcome. So we are welcoming 3 new core units: Deco fixed rate, immune file security, and the SideStream auction services. We've also had 4 new budgets that were accepted for content production, governance communications, and real-world finance, including an MKR compensation plan for these core units. And finally, we had a MIP 6 template amendment, which also passed. So I'd like to take a look at the stuff in RFC now. Can we, yes, please. Yeah, so it's pretty much the same old, except for 1 new addition highlighted in white, an SPF to make malloc-based SPVs, which would make it possible to create legal entity DAOs, also known as LAOs, designed to hold assets similar to how a SPV functions off-chain. Otherwise, we have MIP 57, Real World Assets Committee, MIP 60, Intangible Asset Assignment, and MIP 61. Currently being trialed, a partial core unit onboarding proposal for a fixed rate solution by Pairwise, and the facilitator offboarding and onboarding MIPs for real world finance. We also have some upcoming proposals in case that wasn't enough. So 3 new core units are currently being incubated by SES. We have Maker Talent and Chaos Labs, both of which are probably making their debut on the forum on December 8th, and TechOps. So Maker Talent will focus on recruiting talent for the Maker protocol, targeted through innovative social recruiting practices and offering an amazing candidate experience in their words. And Chaos Labs will focus on securing the protocol through robust agent and scenario-based simulations. TechOps is TechOps. Also, Seth is working on an SPF bounty for developing an effective framework for soliciting, disseminating, and acting on legal advice. And I think that's pretty much it. There's been some bug fixing on the MIPS portal, but it's not very interesting. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pablo. And yeah, let's move on. Forum general updates. I believe this is from Autumn.
Yep, just about to paste the link really quick. All right, here we go. All right, welcome guys to the forum at a glance, a weekly review of what's happened on the forums this week for the week of November 18th to 25th. And there's been a little bit less traffic lately as the holidays roll in, but things are still happening. So we'll begin with this week's top announcements. Yeah, that mic, how's the mic, guys? Not a tin can anymore. Nice. Okay, so let's begin with this week's top announcements. Just in Case steps in as a recognized delegate and presents his delegate platform to help push profitability, burn, communication, and protocol growth. Check out the Meet Your Delegate episode 7 on YouTube. Next up, with recent increase in WBTC-A depth exposure and the addition of the WBTC-B vault, exposure is likely to increase. The risk team believes we should play things safely and propose a set of risk parameters for the WBTC-C vault. Next, Nadia published an update on the Nexo Institutional Vault, which already minted its 1.5 billion debt ceiling using only the ETH-A vault. This pushed risk, real-world finance, protocol engineering, and growth teams to work on the second version of the Nexo Institutional Vault proposal, which they will share very soon. Moving on to the top 3 discussions. The recent discrepancy with votes and outcomes on a signal request was pushed for internal discussion, and in response, GovAlpha presents suggestions on improving clarity regarding signal request outcomes and ask for further discussion and feedback by the community. Next up, the direct deposit module has hit its current debt ceiling of 50 million. Protocol engineering and risk teams are proposing to increase the D3M debt ceiling to 100 million. They also propose to keep the gap at 25 million and the APR target borrow rate bar at 3.9%. And finally, ETH Denver is coming and several wonderful people are already helping us prepare. Content Production posted the current situation with funding and planning, which includes a kickoff party and our own side event. Let Content Production know if anyone's interested in sponsoring bounties, offering swag, and engaging with attendees and other people. And now, moving into our signal requests. Bourbon asked the community to burn half of MKR in the treasury and use the remainder to vest core units. Next up. There is no clear indication about what should be the source of MKR used for future expenses. Maker Breaker presents 2 options. 1, use the MKR from the MakerDAO treasury, or 2, mint new MKR using the pause proxy. And for the next signal request, original DSS vest stream for GovComs was configured incorrectly, resulting in an unclaimed 39,300 DAI. The team believed that we could slide through the 4-month stream period. However, legal services and additional expenses recently arose, which pushed David to formally ask the community whether they support this one-off governance request. Next up, Cassandra proposes to onboard a GUNI DAI USDC with a 0.01% fee tier as a maker collateral type to help stay competitive. Cassandra provides proposed tick ranges and asks the community whether they want to onboard a GUNI DAI USDC 0.01% pool. And next, with gas and ETH prices continuing to go up, our dust limits offer less protection against losses. And in response, Mona Supply proposes whether we should increase dust limits for all vault types. And then moving on to our final signal request. The Matic vault is unprofitable unless it will be able to generate around 30 million DAI. So Nick Kunkel formally asked the community whether governance should offboard the Matic token, as recently done with KNC, Compound, and others. That's it. For more information, check out Forum at a Glance in the post. That includes a 3-point summary, evaluations, reports, ongoing initiatives, help wanted, and more announcements and discussions. Thank you.
Yeah, and I also just want to throw in one more thing. We actually are going to be adding a segment for reports for these presentations next week. But I want to make a special mention of the Ppg report that was actually released just, I think it was today or yesterday. So please take a look at that. That's probably the most pertinent sort of like current report right now. So yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Artem. Thanks, David. All right. So that brings us to our first discussion topic of core unit operations. I believe SES wanted to maybe introduce this. Is that the case? Or?
Yeah, I believe Wouter should be on the call, or maybe Juan. I know that they added some slides here.
That would probably be Wouter. I mean, I can speak a bit about it, but are you Wouter?
I don't think he's here. No, I'll think.
I wanted to say something else before. I wanted to highlight the report that was done by Luca as part of one of the grants regarding real world assets and the financing. So yeah, that there was a call yesterday hosted by Retro. So if anyone's interested in seeing different possibilities of scaling Maker into the real world finance, please check it out. Regarding the core unit operations, I have not done the slides, so I'm not entirely sure what Wouter wants to communicate here, but there are different things that we wanted to highlight. We've been doing it ourselves as we often do in what we call this dog food project, where we try things for ourselves and then we suggest things that have been working and we improve on things that have not. And yeah, budgeting, accounting and reporting is some. Sorry.
I was going to say maybe we could start with the other discussion topic if Wouter is running late or whatever.
Okay, I don't mind, but yeah, sure.
Okay, let's maybe do that. Move on to. Cool. Thank you, David. Next one, we'll see if Wouter can get to us in a little bit. All right, so yeah, speaking about the, I guess, Gelato Uni USDC pool. Maybe Sam is the best person to introduce this, if you're willing, Sam.
Sure. So like Ari from Gelato has introduced, and that's Cassandra, by the way. He's introduced the 1 BIPs pool for the GUNI token, DAI USDC. So this is in response to Uniswap adding this this tier. So kind of an ongoing development over the past week is just after we raised the debt ceiling to 500 million for the 5 BIPs pool. Uniswap just went and added 1 BIPs pool, which has been sucking all the volume out of the 5 BIPs pool. So we were a little uncertain exactly where it would land. So we've been watching it this past week, but it seems pretty clear now. All the volume is going to go to the 1 BIPs pool, even with 7 million locked in there alone. it's already enough to cover like the majority of the trades, it seems. So the Uniswap router is likely just going to put most stuff through there, and so it makes sense to onboard this and support it. So I think right now with 7 million, it's pretty good, but like I could see the volume going up quite significantly if we sort of improve the liquidity with leverage, the same way we did the 5 bips pool, which should boost the fees and stuff like that. So we'll see where it lands, but it makes sense to onboard this, I think. Yeah, maybe just, I don't know, discussion about this. Does anybody have concerns or questions?
Yeah, I have kind of like a couple of thoughts about this. So I know that with the launch of the D3M, and this is related, I promise, with the launch of the D3M, a lot of the thinking about how do we generate DAI from, you know, less scalable collaterals, like we could do it as a proxy through the D3M by providing DAI liquidity to other platforms like Aave, Compound, whatever. My question for this specific thing, GUNI, is there a possible D3M GUNI sort of integration, or is it limited by the fact that it has to be like a very, very specific like GUNI type position? And like, yeah, basically what are ways for us to be more efficient in handling these kinds of collaterals, because they seem to take a long time to set up, and then all of a sudden, you know, one change can throw a whole wrench in the work. So yeah, just thinking about it from a scale perspective and from like a what other tools do we have perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess what you're referring to is sort of like we just added this one, and then all of a sudden, like we're kind of aiming at a moving target here, where like things change and we have to, you know, we just waste all this time on the 5 bips pool. Now we have to go to a 1 bip. So first, I'll say the majority of the work was sort of evaluating the token itself. Now that we have it sort of evaluated, like onboarding the 1 bips, we can do like in a week or two. Like it won't take long, and it's like a minimal effort on the like all the core units basically to get this on board. So we kind of get these things for free now, more not quite free, but pretty close. So there's that. With regards to the D3M, it's an interesting point. I mean, like I think Aave is actually in the process of onboarding GUNI as well into their AMM market. So we could potentially point another D3M at their AMM market and have them sort of more rapidly iterate with these GUNI tokens. That's a possibility. The nice part, again, we built the first D3M for Aave, and we sort of get subsequent ones for Aave specifically for free. So there's definitely a trade-off there, and you know the community can decide which way. You know, if we're having to switch too often, yeah, it may make more sense to delegate to another like protocol to do that.
Yeah, cool. It's good to hear that it's like a low lift after that initial sort of set of work. So that's really positive to hear. But yeah, I'm thinking like even from an Oracle cost perspective. Wait, is there like an Oracle cost for this particular pool? Because I know it's just USDC DAI. So
yeah, so all Oracles, it's not about the Oracle itself, it's about the OSM mostly. So they have to be poked once an hour, regardless of price change. So well, one thing that we're doing right now for these specifically, because they actually are the most expensive, the GUNI, to evaluate the OSM price. So we noticed this. We also noticed that since this is a stable pair, the price like barely changes. So we can like, we're planning to lower this to once per 24 hours. And we could probably even go lower. Like it's just so safe, so like, you know, infrequently changing. There's no point in wasting this amount of on gas. So I think definitely we should be considering the Oracle costs, but I think like we could probably get this to nearly negligible levels if we need to. So I don't think it's a big deal for the Oracles.
got it, thanks.
Is it possible to use the D3M technology and use GUNI in the background? Meaning that when you allocate to a D3M GUNI, it creates the gelato pool and add to it? Or is it too complicated?
So this is basically the Aave AMM market. There's more stuff that needs to happen, but like, yeah, Pointing another D3M at the AMM market is basically what you would do for that.
And I mean, really taking the D3M, maybe it's not the good name, but instead of using Aave in the background, use Gelato in the background. So we get all the fees, because the problem is that the market rates on the GUNI is moving. And if you just dump 100 million or $500 million there, we get all the fees.
Oh, sorry, I was misunderstanding what you guys were saying. Yeah, okay, I get it. So you just directly put the money into the GUNI token. Yep, definitely a possibility. So the reason I originally opted for going with this GUNI route with the users depositing is just because it was a minimal amount of work for us to onboard this. The D3M requires, like, it's not some generic thing. Like, we have to customize it for every single protocol we're integrating with. So this is a lot more engineering time. So I sort of was opting more for, we can just use a standard gem join. It's all very like bare bones maker stuff to onboard these GUNI as like a regular token. So that was the thinking for that, like we have much like sort of bigger bang for our buck sort of, if you will, low hanging fruit here for the PE team. So I didn't want to like occupy too many engineering hours with something that's, it's good, but it's not like the highest priority in my opinion.
Okay, thanks.
So what's the status of the current pool and where is it going to go? I know that Ppg just recently posted their recommendation to lower the actual stability fee from 0.5% to 0.1%. So I'm curious kind of where you see that going. Are those vault users kind of like well taken care of by maker governance, so to speak, and yeah, kind of what's the whole process for actually doing this sort of like replacement?
Yeah, so we're kind of just still watching the fees. In the past like 48 hours, it's really dried up. So like, I think I was looking at the 24-hour fees. It's like $133. Like it's gone, I think, at this point, unless it rebounds for some reason. Yeah, we may even have to go down to 0% or even just shut it down. Yeah, they should unwind themselves, I would think. It's unfortunate in the timing. We just sort of have everybody wind it up just to unwind it, but it's the nature of the space.
All right, thanks, Simon. Thanks. So those are our questions. Unless there's any sort of more questions about this, we can maybe move on. I know it's not like there's not that much to discuss with this, I don't think. All right, let's maybe sort of muddle our way through this. Juan, do you want to give this a go?
Also, alternatively, we have the prompts. So if we don't get Wouter to go through his slides, I'm happy to just pull up those prompts and we could talk through kind of the three pieces that I structured out.
I think Juan's gone now as well. So.
All right, cool. Let me go to the prompt and I could like start us off. All right, so one part of this whole topic of core unit operations, first of all, I want to say that, it's been less than a year since the first core unit has actually been ratified. So that's pretty freaking crazy considering the fact that as of today, I believe we have 18 ratified and active core units. And many of them in becoming core units, the facilitator kind of has this responsibility to facilitate the mandate of each core unit. And a big part of the culture and kind of like the expectation of core units is to have a sufficient level of transparency into the financing of the core units, the spend, kind of the budgeting, the reporting, all of that stuff. And facilitators kind of by nature haven't been, set up as accountants themselves. And so a lot of core units, at least that our team is talking to, and also that SES is talking to and that ACE is talking to, are really struggling with the accounting and reporting portion. And so when this happens, it's obviously a lot harder for the real world finance team, guys like ACE, to really report on the financing in a timely manner and in an accurate manner. And so kind of one big piece of the operational puzzle for core units is getting the budgeting, accounting, and reporting right, efficient, streamlined, and kind of synced between all of us. And of course, like when each facilitator needs to be individually trained to do this kind of transparency accounting, it's really hard to scale, and it's slow, and people, it's kind of hard. And so there has been conversations in the chats and in various calls about like giving an overarching accounting and real world finance core unit sort of like this authority or mandate to help facilitators with this transparency accounting. And that's kind of like the current state of things. The first prompt that I put up is, what have core unit experiences been like? And I could speak from GovCom's perspective. So we're a team of 3 people. We were ratified back in August, and it took about 2 months before we could set up our official sort of like partnership with Accountable, and all of our like contracts were actually only signed 2 months later in October. And by the time we actually got that first round of full accounting data, it was like a mix between my own personal data for that 2 months, and then Accountable, and then syncing all that, and then making it sort of like presentable in a public format. So that itself was like an enormous sort of thing to work through. And in the middle of all that, a mistake or two might have been made. Previous actuals may have been revised even after like ACE reported them, perhaps back in October, for example. So, and obviously, like, it's hard to deal with that when it is like small amounts for teams like ours, right? Like we have $500,000 a year budget compared to some other teams that are way bigger with way bigger budgets. And so like our experience has really been like, we're trying our best, and we're really thankful for like the templates that SES team has set up. And we're really thankful for guys like ACE that really follow up and are proactive in pushing us to get those numbers. And so, yeah, that's kind of the highest level like experience share that I could give you guys. And I am actually very much in support of an overarching accounting core unit or finance core unit that could help core units like ours. And so I'm totally curious to hear from other facilitators that might be on this call what your experiences have been like, and whether in general, like how do you see the budgeting, accounting, and reporting function across core units? How should it be? Should it be this transparent, et cetera, et cetera? So I'll open it up. I'll stop ranting.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, David. Sorry, Long, to jump over the top of you.
So go, you go. That's fine.
So I guess like in terms of experiences that you have on there. So yeah, I mean, I have from the get-go used a spreadsheet that gives me a line-by-line transaction for everything that goes out of the multi-sig. So very transparent. I then transitioned to using what the SES group started with. They created a spreadsheet that basically does a tracking, and it has some mechanisms in place to ensure that there are checks so that what's forecast, and basically helps to do forward-looking budgeting. So I'm using that, and the experiences with that are fine. It was pretty similar to the spreadsheet I started with. It lets me track, individuals. Of course, individuals in some cases are individuals or LLCs. I also have auditing companies like Chain Security, tooling setups like Satora, other third parties like Block Science, and then of course the LLCs of individuals that are set up and globally for PE. So that all works really well. I've got it down pretty much not automated, but it's a known monthly process that I go through, having the checks, working with the other multi-sig owners to get all those processes sorted. And then, yeah, like you said, I work with AS as well, show him the number. And then, over the last couple of months, we've been getting better at forecasting. Some of the challenges there have been that with the third parties, we have some slightly larger expenses when it comes to audits. And those are not a month-by-month process. So sometimes they're larger, sometimes they're lower based on how we split the auditing and the contracts that we have coming through. Not a problem, it just sort of skews the numbers sometimes. So there's my plan to make that a bit more transparent is to do a summary of the budget so far and break that down into why are the numbers where they are, and give a bit more explanation, and also provide that on-chain verification if people have concerns about it. But yeah, that's all been going really well. I think pain points, sometimes it takes a little bit of time and effort to get the invoices from people. On one of our third parties, we're a couple of months behind. So I'm going to have a big outflow in the next month to cover that. And then because of the way we work, we also need to provide the next quarter, or in some cases 6 months of payments upfront to support that access to software over a long period of time, and that can be a big number. My budget reflects that, so it's not a problem from an accounting point of view. It's just sort of goes to show that up and down outflow as needed, which is cool. And yeah, you got a question, David?
Yeah, I'm actually super curious about that because like many of our core units are set up to receive our budgets through a module called DSS Best. And this kind of gives us a linear distribution of a budget over time. And with stuff like, upfront 6-month software expenses, how do you structure that into the DSS Vest stream? Do you just, I'm curious, like I would imagine like a one-time payment, or I'm curious how you navigate that problem, because that's something that we're also struggling with.
So we were lucky in the sense that our third party didn't provide the invoice upfront. If we needed to fund that upfront and be able to put down a deposit essentially on that work going forward, we would have had to have those funds from the get-go. But because the way we've had some leeway, and I accounted for that in the initial budget, so it gave me some space to handle it. It did mean that for a period of time we've had some surplus in the core budget, and we put some of that into the emergency multi-sig because it's higher security. It's not the one that we have access to monthly, so it's been parked there. But of course that will be reflected in the half-year or annual audit that we do of all the funds that we have, what's surplus and what has to go back into the surplus buffer or get reallocated if it's needed elsewhere. So yeah, the solution there, I think using the spreadsheet from SES has been quite helpful. It also works on 2 levels. So internally within the core unit, we have the line-by-line reference. There's a lot of personal information there, so that's not shared broadly or beyond the core unit itself. Then it abstracts those payments into groups, so we're able to then put forward to the community, here are the groups. And I want to go in more detail on this, which will take a little bit of time, because I want to actually split what are our L2 costs, what are our core protocol costs, and where are we spending costs specifically on certain contractors, so that we can have a more transparent discussion about where costs are and why they are the way they are. So yeah, I think I'll wrap it up there. In terms of resources you had here, the spreadsheet, and also want to do a review so that people can look at it, and I think that will help complement the work that AS and those guys have been doing. So yeah, any questions, Paper, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a question or comment on any particular core unit, but I do think it would probably be helpful if we just kind of wrapped our heads around are core units supposed to be contractors of the DAO, or are they part of the DAO themselves, right? Because if they're just contractors, it's the money and MKR that goes out the door that matters. Whereas if they are part of the DAO, like employees or some kind of employee-like relationship, then we really do need to dig into like what gets spent on what a little more, or at least have the right for our finance folks to ask for more line by line stuff. But if, probably the easier approach from the DAO's perspective is that all these core units are contractors, and it's really just, are they performing and are we getting our money's worth? And then we don't have to mess around with all the internal financial stuff.
I think a challenge with that is if you treat it that way, then who's checking that they're performing well and that the accounting is like has integrity, right? Like the way that I see it is, like even within our team, I can only really use my team as an example, but like I'm on a salary, right? Our other 2 full-time team members are on a salary. I don't know, is that us working for a salary under this entity, the specific entity for our team? Yes. Are we salaried employees of the DAO? I have no idea. But our team also has 11 or like 8 to 11, they're on and off, different part-time contributors who all bill like, sub $1,000 a month in billables. And they are not on contract, they're at will, contractors, right? So they're at will employees, or, what are they? Are they contractors if they haven't signed a contract? I don't know. But the point is, within each core unit entity or structure, I think there's, salary, there should be room for salaried and contributors, but whether or not like the DAO delegates and MKR holders want real transparency and proof of integrity, like that's going to be a matter of either creating oversight core units, like either specifically for accounting, specifically for OPSEC, specifically for like other functions, or it's going to be a matter of having requirements for each core unit to handle it in-house themselves to some degree. But yeah, I think it's the question that you're asking, Paper, I think is a matter of how much granular transparency and integrity checking do you want to set up and how. But am I kind of hitting the mark there?
Kind of. So, I mean, I think first, let me just say, I think we'll need an accounting CU no matter what we decide on something like this. But I mean, I guess where I'm getting is, when someone comes to, any CU comes to us and provides a budget request, do I or anyone else in the DAO, do we have any business saying, well, why are you spending, $30,000 on travel or, $40,000 on hardware, picking out individual stuff like that and saying, why is this so high? If these are contractors providing a service that we renew by giving them more money every quarter, then it really doesn't matter how they spend it as long as they deliver the results that we feel warrant giving them more money the next quarter. Whereas, I mean, I guess my question is, how centralized do we want the oversight of the budget to be? And I guess this is unusual for me to be on this side of the spectrum, but I kind of feel like less bandwidth for the DAO and probably less liability for both parties is for everybody to just be, I mean, these are all legal entities for the most part that are providing services to the DAO, and they themselves have employees, but that doesn't, yeah, I mean, I guess I think we should clarify this, because if people waste money but still deliver on what their bottom line is worth, that's not our business if they're contractors, right?
But isn't it like, don't you as the delegates want the core units to have efficient spend and maybe some sort of function to like call people out on stuff? Because although it's micromanaging to some level, like I don't think it's wrong to have some sort of function for efficiency. And sorry for going out of turn. I saw Nadia's hand up, but I just really wanted like to kind of bounce back off that or ping pong off that.
Well, going to Paper's question, I think from a legal perspective, we are all contractors, because if we want employees, we have to incorporate companies in each country where the employees are. So from a legal perspective, we are contractors, at least that was like what I have to do with my core unit. We are incorporated. We have a legal entity. but I can't have employees because if I wanted to do that, I will have to have companies all over the world to hire these people, and that makes no sense for me. That on one side, and how I manage the expenses, I think it's difficult. I agree with all of you. I think all facilitators, like it's insane. And for me, that I have like a 12 people in my core unit, it's even harder. And also, like, my payments go to different partners, and for campaigns, for creating content, to organize events. So sometimes it's insane. So I hired an accountant, and this accountant is helping me with that. What I want, I mean, of course, I have to every time I do a transaction, I have to fill everything in a spreadsheet, but that helps me to keep me organized, and then I can present that information in the format I want. But what I think it's missing is, I don't know, like, I think we need like to have an agreement on what is the community or the maker holders expecting from the core units in regarding how we show our expenses, because I do it in one way, and I think every core unit is doing it in their own way. I like this initiative of ACE and the Real World Finance core unit about like asking our expenses, and they are creating like a unified vision of our expenses. I like that a lot, but of course, and I want to know what the community thinks about this, and how you want to like have access to our expenses. What I'm doing for now is every time I close a month, I'm posting in the growth updates, the P&L, and I'm planning to do at the end of the year, a closing of the year, and like the remaining budget that I have, return it to the DAO. But like, we should have like at least an agreement between all the core units and do the same.
Thanks, Nadia. Seb, yeah, feel free.
Yeah, so we've discussed a lot with Mark AES on that, and there's a lot of problems. If we want to go too much into details, every core unit will spend a lot of time getting all the invoices, and we can check if you will buy a pen and if the price of the pen was too high or too low. And I've done a lot of that in the past, and it's not that useful. And I kind of agree with Pepper that you are paying someone to do something, and what matters is, do you get the result? And even getting that is not easy, because we have almost 20 core units, and I'm quite sure we don't know much. If we take every individual in this call, we don't know much what every people are doing, so we are not tracking anyway what they are doing. But that's and so I think it should be fairly simple. And in my core units, it's quite easy. We are 7. Some part-times, and at the end of the day, everyone sends an invoice, or not even an invoice, I just need an amount, a proof if they spent something else than what they worked on, and I reimburse everything. So it's 7 payments per month. It's not that much. And if I need to pay for something, I will use my bank account for my company to pay for it forward, and I reimburse myself at the end. Because I consider everyone is a freelance. But you can analyze all the expenses in detail, or you can just analyze what was really spent and what is over budgeting, and give a more precise view of what we expense as a DAO. For instance, there was 2 million upfront to the DAO Foundation. That's not recurring, so that should be tell to the community that, well, we did have a lot of expenses this month, but it will not continue. And at some point, Mark did a great analysis to show that, well, our cost run rate is half of what we have currently. It feels like we are spending a lot, but we are spending only half of that. And that's not so expensive to have this information. And that's super helpful. And the other part that we are trying to achieve, but it's super difficult as well, is to know how much we are spending on each strategic initiatives of MakerDAO. So for instance, let's say that real world asset is the strategic objective of MakerDAO this year. The question at the end of the year is how much of the whole budget of MakerDAO did we spend of real world asset? And I mean for all core units. If it's only 1%, I mean, it's a joke. It's not a strategic initiative. It's just a wish. If we spend 10%, well, okay, that's strategic initiative. So that shows and allow you to see if that's interesting or not, or if it's really strategic for the DAO or not. Obviously, it's not that easy because you need to ask PE how much they spent on real world asset, and that is quite complex. So it's not super easy. But go on, David.
I was just going to disagree with you on one point. I agree with a lot of what you said, but I just want to say that I don't think the cost of an initiative is necessarily tied to its impact. I think you could have very high cost, low impact initiatives, and I think you could have very low cost, high impact initiatives. So that's the only thing I disagree with you on.
All right, thanks, David. Thanks, Seb. Derek, go ahead.
I was just going to pick up on the comment in the sidebar between, I think it was yourself and Paper referring to core units and whether they are or are not for-profit entities. I don't think they are, because at least in my case, everything will have to be or is declared as either being put forward for I guess a cost center or an individual, a third party, an auditor, etc., or returned. We don't have strict rules in place, which is maybe what Paper is getting to, about that returning. You know, we have these loose agreements, like what Nadia said. You know, we will do an end of year audit. We will return the funds. This isn't strictly specified anyway. Maybe that's part of the problem we're getting at. I think we're all working towards that. So yeah, I don't think core units are for-profit entities. At the end of the year, we do not expect to have a surplus of any sort. If we do, we put that into the emergency budget, which will require a discussion. And yeah, so I agree with Paper there. You know, having expectations. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. But I think you're onto something there, that having formalized agreements and expectations is key.
I do want to be cognizant of time, and there are a couple other prompts if you guys are curious, but happy to, if long as comfortable, to keep plugging away.
We can move on to one of the other prompts if you want. I think that's fine.
I'm actually going to skip prompt 2 because I failed to realize that Thomas Flitter, who was actually leading an information output audit that our team was doing, is not here. So I wanted him to speak a little bit to these prompts. So I'm happy to table this for another time. But the gist of it is, even outside of like budgeting, accounting, reporting, there's also operationally kind of a level of communication that's expected for stakeholders to be able to access, you know, your team in a certain level and see kind of like what your team is doing and understand the story of your team, the function, and the progress. But yeah, so I'll skip over this. And the third prompt that I had was about cross-functional initiative coordination. So, you know, we have 18 or something core units, and we're all working on a broad range of initiatives and sub-initiatives and sub-initiatives. And so we've been over the last year kind of operationally, internally working towards greater efficiency, greater tracking. Like we've seen a number of different tools emerge, like, you know, the shared holiday sheet where people can put up their absences, like their AFK or something. We also have a cross-functional initiative tracker that, you know, we cover on our mandated actors calls and kind of go through line by line. And soon we're actually also going to be mapping out initiatives and who leads those initiatives, who leads the sub initiatives, and kind of try to document everything so that expectations across the board are clear. But of course, like people have mentioned, you know, like the one big concern is, you know, how are we efficient in our operations? And I think getting to be very efficient as a decentralized org with a bunch of these independent core units is really important. And so like that was my little gist of the report of what it's like from the inside. And I guess like the pain points from my perspective are really just the fact that these tools aren't like to the level that they should be yet, but we're early and we're making them. So and then yeah, so happy to open it to others to also share their perspectives and ideas too. And also I know there's also stuff happening in the chat, perhaps about prompt 1. So happy to revisit that, but I'll let Long guide it. So.
Sure. So, I mean, I think this is something that we're looking at in more detail recently. It's one of the initiatives SES, I think, is pushing, just to sort of make the cross-functional coordination more effective. Because like it's kind of worked in the past, but it does kind of tend to like exclude people who aren't like explicitly core units or core unit facilitators, right? So there was some debate on as to whether to include like you know, the people working on front ends, the support maker, right, into some of these meetings, which would potentially be useful, but is also like, yeah, it's just a bit strange in some ways, right? Because they're not technically part of the org, as for whatever it is. So it's kind of, I mean, this is all sort of something that grows out of the fact that like membership of a DAO is kind of fuzzy, right? So, you know, in order to sort of have these cross-functional initiatives be effective, you need to, you know, either make the meetings and sort of communications like transparent and public if possible. But obviously in some cases that's like less possible, which makes it harder to make sure that everyone gets the information they need, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like one big concern that we had inside of the mandated actors meeting like months ago was, you know, hey, we have these major initiatives. We don't know who's leading them. We don't have like a singular like coordination call for many of them. We just kind of have like this one big call per week where all the facilitators gather and kind of try to work through blockers and dependencies and stuff like that, and maybe next steps. But it's really hard to scale when you have 18 teams and like 8 different initiatives, and then, you know, underneath those 8 there's like 64 sub initiatives. And so a big part of the challenge, and also that exclusive access thing, because okay, mandated actors call, like who goes there? Is it just facilitators, or is it facilitators plus key coordinators, product leads, etc.? And a part of the work that the GovComms team has been doing is to try to work with SES, to work with Derek and like you know, the different engineering teams to figure out how to map these initiatives. And not just that, but how do you actually, as a part of that map, include the relevant stakeholder groups? Because within the coordination effort or track of any one of these initiatives or sub initiatives, there are other relevant people, right? Like if it's just your team, you're in an echo chamber. And if you're not sharing the information about your coordination call somewhere publicly or doing proactive outreach to people outside of your in-group, you're not going to have effective feedback loops. You're not going to have effective like solution design conversations. You're not going to have, you will increase risk for what you're building. You're going to increase the risk that it's not going to be the right thing. So in general, operationally, like we want to open up these initiatives to stakeholders that are relevant to be able to join in these conversations, coordination calls, documentation, whatever it might be. But really step one, it has to be kind of like this full fleshed out picture. Like you have to have full synced up agreement on the map of the initiatives all the way down. You have to understand who the leads are. And then you also have to kind of play a continuous game of, who are the relevant people. And our team is in the process of creating a stakeholder database, an internal one. And it includes not just core units and delegates, it includes members of media, integrators, and obviously it's a pretty incomplete database at the moment. But we also kind of use that database to map out the stakeholder ecosystem. So who are the actual stakeholders? Who, front ends, okay, keepers, auction participants, right? Oracles, the people actually pushing, those sets or whatever the new software is, updates, and there's a whole web of stakeholders that are outside of our little core unit and like delegate and MKR voter bubble. And so it's really important because that's our business, like our keepers, our DAI users, our vault users, like there has to be some level of ability for them to come in and see what's going on and be able to give proactive feedback. And so, yeah, I'm rambling for a bit, so I'll kind of shut up there and let other people comment or whatever you like.
David, just to tag on to that, to give a real example, one thing that you and I have been working on with some of the other stakeholders has been the L2 work. So you guys know that now we've got Sam, Chris, Bartek, and others in the team in PE working on layer 2 work, but that work has a lot of dependencies with other potential L2s, not only the StarkNet group, but not only integrations, not only some of the groups that SES may want to integrate, which may have keepers, may have interfaces. So what we're trying to do is remove this or try to prevent having an in-group and out-group, and really open, like David said, open this L2 discussion as an example to the broader community and really build up, what are the target releases we're trying to target, so that growth know, okay, when can we expect to do the marketing work around these initiatives? What does it mean for other L2s? And so operationally, the way this is looking, we had a meeting, I think it was last week, where we walked through, okay, here are the key deliverables. We agree. We had people from Nadia's group add thoughts and ideas around, okay, fast withdrawals, the DAI wormhole, MCD on L2, and that's built up a picture, essentially a high-level roadmap of what we want to deliver, and then we break that roadmap down into its constituent parts and put timelines against it, estimate against it, and that work helps map out for the broader community. And we want to still, I guess, roll that information up to the mandated actors, but have that more broadly known and available to the community, so that, like David says, everyone's in the loop as to what this is delivering, when can we expect it, what are the dependencies, what are the risks, are we putting money where we should be, do the objectives line up with what we set out to do initially, and basically that this bridge building, like Will says, is there and visible for everyone involved. So that's my little spiel. We're working on it. I hope to open that up to the community, and I think, David, we can totally do that coming up. So over to you guys.
Yeah, and also I really want to echo something that William Remor is saying in the chat. So he said, as a collective, we just don't realize that ops risk equals reputation risk is in an open organization like ours. And I think like a big focus of the culture and kind of like the mind share of Maker has been on like this financial risk and technical risk aspect. But really, like if you look at any business, there's also operational risk. There's very real operational risk, and the way that we mitigate it is through really good coordination, because when coordination fails, that's when products fail. that's when bottlenecks happen. That's when delays happen. That's when, 6 months of work gets thrown out the window because you didn't talk to the person 6 months ago and you invested all these resources, right? So yeah, just wanted to tack on some, my thoughts there.
All right, thanks, David. I believe we're out to here now. If we're out to, oh, I guess Eric, did you have something to add first? Maybe that's.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I guess, in regards to communication, operational communication, I just wanted to make a quick comment on, I guess, collateral offboarding. With the recent offboardings, I'm going to speak personally from a real world experience on Aave. I was actually probably about a quarter of the outstanding DAI was from my Aave vaults. I was gone for the weekend. I, pop on the forums. I clicked, search for Aave. I don't generally jump into a lot of the, Signal forums and that sort of thing. But when I typed Aave in the search, nothing came up about offboarding or anything like that. Ultimately, position was closed or vote happened. Position was closed fairly quickly with the, the ratio ticking up very quickly. So, I was liquidated obviously without a penalty, which is great, but at the same time, it doesn't really offer a lot of a time for a position change, especially when I was trying to support, an asset that was, smaller portion of Maker and have been kind of for quite a while since Black Friday. But at the end of the day, I'm looking now kind of going, shit, it was a 6-figure loss at this point that kind of got triggered. Sucks. Ultimately, I was throwing up for 2 days and I was gone on a weekend trip for 2 days. I was gone for 4 days and ultimately, that I know ultimately Maker needs to make a decision to have something, but 4 days and I, before I leave, I check everything. I'm checking my phone. DeFi Saver was being checked. And ultimately, when I talked with Nikolaj from DeFi Saver, he said, when that happened, we don't even know what rates coming up next. So basically, all my fail safes failed right there. Now I'm looking at it going, okay, what can I do for Maker? I then jump on the forum and I'm digging in deeper. And even there's just confusion around Matic. It seems like the operational units, I'm not sure exactly the coordination there, but there's a 1 vote on Matic being offboarded in along with Aave and all those. And then all of a sudden there's, chat within there of how Matic is going to, come up with its promises and that sort of thing. And then very shortly after, there's another poll, by Nick, are we offboarding Matic again? And I'm sitting here trying to figure out what asset can I get back into to make my, losses back here. And I don't have any faith, honestly, in the protocol at this point. If I can step away from 4 days when I have what I feel is adequate fail safes, and I was on my phone and with an asset like Aave, which you guys have D3Ms, and there's a lot of protocol integration, and sorry I'm going on here, so I'll kind of cut it here. But ultimately, the communication there, from an outsider looking in, I'm trying to use the platform. I feel like I was an early supporter. I was on the call on the Black Thursday and jumped into a vault shortly after. I couldn't get a keeper up in time, but I wanted to help the platform as best I can. Now on this call, I'm here sitting going, oh shit, I don't even know if I have enough for the dust limits if it gets increased too much, and I just got taken out. So from an outsider's perspective, reading the forums and everything from an operational perspective, it is a little confusing and disjointed, and then especially when the hammer dropped as fast as it did, which I would have discussion points on that, but obviously I don't think this is the time now. So anyways, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Eric. Maybe a little off topic, but yeah, definitely important. Does anybody want to kind of respond to that at all?
I mean, I think we can all agree that this was probably a terrible user experience, no matter how big your vault size is, and it's come up before. I think we are. I mean, I think we all recognize that it's not a great situation, particularly when and you're not the first person to even go to our forums and look around and not know. I ran into somebody, was it last week or something, that had like a uni LP that got offboarded and was just wandering around trying various Discord channels, and I just happened to see them and talk to them. So if you have some suggestions about forums or communication venues that likely to be seen or likelier than whatever we're doing now. I think we are all ears, and I think we recognize this is a problem we need to do better.
Sharing in the forum any thoughts you have on what paper suggestion would be pro. All right, I think we're ready to give it to Outer, yeah?
Maybe, yeah.
Thank you, David.
I think you're gonna have to sort of just rush through the highlights, I'm afraid, at this stage. But yeah, we'll see.
It's fine. Apologies, I unfortunately mixed up the meeting time. So what I prepared and just wanted to go through is a little bit of an overview on 3 areas: so transparency, auditing, and quality control, and then automation in the DAO, and the way that we've been looking at it at SES. So I thought this would be an interesting overview. David, if you go to the next slide, the first thing I want to clarify is the background of this. So the way that we focused our attention at SES, because there is so much to do in the DAO and so many improvements that we can make, that it's difficult to do everything at once. So in the beginning, we focused on basic operations with the incubation program, incubating the UX core unit for governance portal, auction services, the unified core unit now for security, and then basic stuff like talent, testing infrastructure, and tech ops. There's even one missing there still, which is the emergency shutdown infrastructure. So that is actually one that we're still looking to incubate a new core unit for, because this one is currently not really well covered. The other thing we focused on is dog fooding best practices. So within our scopes of removing these barriers between decentralized workforce capital and work, we looked into business practices, people, legal, finance, operations, communications, etc. All very basic and just the first versions of what can be much improved upon, but yeah, to put the basics in place. And then now what the focus is shifting to, our core units that have to do with real world assets, a lot more legal, education also coming up. But today I want to talk about the transparency, auditing, and quality control initiatives that have been going on and that we'll continue to focus on, as well as what I've called the MakerDB, or that we'll talk about at the end. So if we get to the next slide, different piece of context I want to give is the way we look at this, how this is basically happening in a decentralized context. So because there is no centralized leadership that can set policies and immediately basically give orders down the chain of command, the way we're approaching it is a little bit different. So first we tried to, as I already mentioned, dog food stuff, so lead by example, and then analyze the work that is being done by others in the MakerDAO as well, in the ecosystem. Summarize these different initiatives, and then finally push for standardization and formalization. So the important thing is that this is a process that takes a while, and you know, this is a post from April 23rd, and that one talked about the core unit budget structure and everything like that. And as we will see, this is kind of the path that we've been following to try and put these best practices in place, and then slowly merge it with other core units work and push for standardization in the long run. The result should really be a very good solution that has a wide support from the DAO. So if you go to the first one, so talked about decentralized capital, decentralized workforce capital and work. So if we start with capital, next slide, I've summarized a little bit what we already have in terms of financial transparency. So of course, we all know our MIP 40C3s with the definition of the core unit budgets, both the DAI and the MTR bonuses.
One of the changes there is that the two are typically split up these days. So any core units going through our incubation program or the ones that we're advising, we tell them to use cleared budget categories and use the MPR incentive framework and have those in separate MIPs so that it is documented. And this is, of course, the starting point for all the finance overviews. We have a core unit budget spreadsheet. So this is a template for internal use to ensure that the core units can properly forecast, keep track of their estimates, and then compare their actuals with the forecasts that have been made, and then also the budgets that are in their MIPs. The other piece we've put in place for the core units that have gone through our incubation program and the ones that we've advised are the monthly budget statements. So they're already linked there. I have a few examples in the next slides. And these really are the basic transparency tools for budgeting with core units. And we're working with others in the DAO, such as the great work that AES has been doing from the Real Finance core unit in creating these overviews on a DAO level, what the actual expenses are versus the budgets. So ultimately, these two efforts, bottom up meets the top down effort, and then you can have like the full breakdown from the DAO level up to the different budget categories on the monthly expenses of the core units. So going through the next slides, this is the budget spreadsheet that I was talking about. So we have a process in place there where there are basically four checkpoints. So the first one is the budget cap, which is on the MIP level. The second one is a rolling 3-month forecast. So encouraging the core units to make sure that they do not exceed their budget cap or would not exceed their budget cap at the expenses that they need to be done in the coming 3 months. And then as the month comes closer, so basically zooming into the estimates, which the only unknown there are things like exchange rate, transfer fees, etc. And then ultimately compare those to the actuals. So to have this lightweight but proper budget framework in place. Going to the next slide, we have the next piece of documentation, transparency reporting, which are the monthly budget statements. So this is an example from one of the DUX reports. So that is reporting on this 3-month forecast that I just mentioned, basically pulled from the spreadsheet. And while the budget spreadsheet is an internal tool that is not published, the monthly budget statements are. So this is a summary as a reporting tool to the DAO, where indeed this 3-month forecast is published and then can be compared to the budget cap, for example. The actuals of last month are also documented together with the MTR vesting schedule as it is currently active within the core unit. And then there are the monthly transfers that are requested. Now, of course, we try to automate as much as possible on the DAO level. We very much welcome the use of the DSS Vest modules, which automate the payment of the core units. But in our setup that I will return to in a later slide, we actually have an auditing step in between, and the core unit does not immediately or directly receive the budget. They need to request the monthly transfer from the auditor so that there is a check in place there to make sure that the funds are actually being used for what they're supposed to be used for. As I mentioned, of course, the Real Finance core unit has done a lot of work on finance reporting. So if we go to the next slide, all this information can then roll up to a DAO-wide overview that shows how the budget cap, how it relates to the forecast, how it relates to the actual expenses. So this is ultimately the full overview we want. but we want to have it more like on a routine basis, that this information is available as real time as possible across as many core units as possible. If we then go to the next part, which is the actual auditing, another initiative that we've taken is the core unit budget transparency map that we have published. And this is very much in the context of what I mentioned, slowly moving from individual structures and initiatives to a standard that can work for all the core units. So we started by documenting the multi-sig wallet setup of all the different core units. And the one depicted here is what I mentioned, the structure that we are recommending for new core units, which puts an auditor in between the funds that are received through the DSS Vest stream from the protocol, and which basically has two roles that perform a check on the monthly budget statements and the new top-ups of the 3-month runway that the core unit is requesting. So for the SAS core unit, for example, the one that has just been ratified and will receive their first payment at the end of this week, there are two roles that are signers of the multi-sig. So currently they're both SES, but the intention is to spin that off in a separate core unit. But there is an accountant role and an auditor role. And these are actually, again, multi-sigs that allow for this review of the monthly budget statement, the approval of it, and then finally the top-up of the 3-month runway that the core unit is requesting. So this really is a continuous check on the expenses of the different core units. And then the maker protocol is a backup signer to make sure that if something happens, that the funds are still recoverable. The monthly auditing flow itself includes the definition of controls. And if we go to the next slide, we can see the work in progress there. So this is an example of the budget controls that are audited for the DUX core unit. And you see it's a long checklist with very specific checks, checking whether their expenses are in line with the budget cap that have been proposed in the MIP, so that everything is according to the agreement with the DAO. Is there quarterly forecast below the budget cap for the quarter? Are the actuals not exceeding the forecast that was made last month, or is there not too big of a difference? And then we are basically color coding this, and you can get a mechanic where, for example, if a core unit is systematically overspending, that there are like we put them on notice basically, so give them a warning, and then the idea is to give them some time to fix it. But if the deviation is too high, or it is too consistent, then this would be escalated to the DAO basically and brought to the attention of the community. So this is a system that we're currently developing for that. Going to the next slide, we have a look at the second part, which is the decentralized work. And there too, and I believe that one was just discussed as I was joining by Derek. So I won't go too much into detail, but also making the planning and the progress reporting of the work that is happening in the DAO by the different core units better. We have this evolution of the mandated actors call, which was historically a very lean planning call for cross-core unit coordination, for example, with the collateral onboarding prioritization framework that was created in that context. But in general can do better in terms of transparency. So people are asking who's working on what is the roadmap, what are the timelines, why are things prioritized the way they're prioritized, etc. And then the second thing is that it's the format is not scalable to more core units in its current format. So of course we went up from about 5 core units to more than 20 now. So what's the solution? The solution is to organize around major work initiatives, break these planning and coordination sessions out in various and separate stakeholder alignment meetings, and then do better facilitation and reporting on these meetings. So David, if you go to the next slide, then goes a little bit more in detail. So reorganizing around major work initiatives, for example, the growth initiatives or business lines, but also the internal work that has to do with the governance and operations. The breakout in the stakeholder alignment meetings, there are the L2 meetings that I believe Derek was talking about when I joined. The crypto collateral onboarding and real world assets collateral onboarding are two new ones that we're currently starting, and then the governance and operations would be separate. So these are the four major ones that I'm aware of. But of course, as the number of core units grows and the work that is being done grows, then we expect more of these parallel alignment meetings to continue. And this is a fairly scalable structure. I think a very important opportunity there is that we can start with more systematic facilitation and better reporting on these work planning and progress reporting meetings. So together with David and Derek, we've been listing a number of well-known open meeting formats with templates, so that basically like anyone can, when there is a need, anyone can pick up one of these templates and run one of these meetings, which have like a properly understood function and purpose. And then they have some summary formats that will allow us to report back to governance. So for example, with timelines, roadmaps, etc. So David, if you go to the next slide, this is maybe was already mentioned, but these, to give an idea, these types of meetings, they can be ideation meetings where there is a very broad stakeholder participation for basically brainstorming new features and items on the roadmap, which would then go through a solution design phase, and then get to the point where the solution is clearly defined and there is a sign-off by the different stakeholders. So not just the technical teams, but also, for example, the growth team, the legal teams would have to weigh in there, and any other functions that are active in the DAO and that are relevant stakeholders. Also outside stakeholders. So for example, Owezo is of course a separate company, but could definitely be involved in these coordination meetings where that was more difficult with the mandated actor calls. And then finally, for the execution, once a solution is known, we can break down the work, identify the different deliverables by the different core units, identify dependencies between them, and then have these regular check-ins where the progress of the work is checked, and have things like a timeline, release timeline for better coordination. Also, when we'll have marketing and communications, etc., to make it all a lot more streamlined and better, with better reporting.
Can I jump in with just one quick comment on this as well?
Yeah, definitely.
So another part of increasing the visibility of these types of meetings is the management of the public calendars at MakerDAO. So in the last 2 months, you might have noticed that the one MakerDAO public calendar for votes and calls was actually split into two, for votes and important dates, and then for calls. And I think a part of the vision for increasing the operational efficiency and the visibility of these types of calls is to put like many of these stakeholder alignment meetings, or most of them, on the actual public call calendar, and then also providing a sort of like function in the description where if you are an outside stakeholder and you weren't directly invited, you could request an invite. And obviously this doesn't exist yet. This is something that that my team is envisioning, that we're working with Wouter and others to do this. And this is not like specifically for L2. Like this can generally scale across different initiatives. That's the main goal. Like we want to provide a framework that really anybody could use. and that can allow stakeholders to really easily go subscribe to a public calendar and kind of, filter Control F what they're looking for, whether it's a very specific initiative or something like front end related, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, David.
So,
if you
sorry,
if you go to
dive in, we're like at 1/2 now. So could you try and wrap up, I guess? If you're close to the end.
Well, 4 more slides, so I think we can wrap it up in 5 minutes. If we go to the next one, it's the aspect of quality control. So there are different initiatives in the works that really involve multiple core units. You see them listed there. So the financial KPIs, so ACE from the real finance core unit started a great thread there and an initiative that will start tracking those. We have the Immunify core unit that has been voted in, which will be scoring security practices and work with core units to improve those. We have the communication standards that David is working on, and this is also basically giving a score to different core units. And then there is work in progress around technical practices, things like proper testing, technical audits, etc. And then also legal checklists to ensure that the core unit setups there are also in order. Going to the next slide, we one particular aspect, so we do need more information about the FTEs in the core units. So currently that are full-time equivalents to the number of people and how, if they're working full-time or half-time in the core units. That is currently a missing piece, which is low-hanging fruit because it can easily be remedied. But we need it for different reasons. So we want to know the roles, the FTEs, when people are hired and fired or are moving on, and when there are FTE adjustments. So that is needed to, so currently there's only the budget MIP, and they're needed for multiple reasons. So the MPR incentive bonuses, they are set up in a way that they need to be tied to the individuals, because it's the individual talent that we want to retain, not a service or something, an external service. So we need to know who joins when, etc. for the vesting schedules to have a minimal check on that. GovComms is working on the stakeholder registry, which also needs this kind of information. We have the talent core unit in our incubation program, which may reach out for expert interviews and related stuff. And then within SCS, we have our own X-ray project, which is basically doing ecosystem health monitoring. So the awareness, onboarding, and retention of currently technical talent, but in the future we'll try and expand it to other professions as well. So going to the next one, we so talking about X-rays, so you can read the report that we already did on best practices on developer attraction and retention. But now the project is really entering a new phase, which is more relevant to transparency and review. So we'll be collecting MakerDAO ecosystem activity and build a dashboard which has these metrics that reflect the health of the developer ecosystem at MakerDAO. So, for example, taking from existing data sources about GitHub activity and things like that, which can give us an idea of how many developers are active within MakerDAO and how this is evolving. We'll also want to do onboarding and exit interviews to understand why people are attracted to MakerDAO, why they decided to join. But equally important, why people decide to quit or to move on, and how we can improve our retention, because as I've repeated so many times, our human capital at Maker is really the most important moat that we have. So moving to the last slide, this is kind of the latest development in this, what I call MakerDB, or our database. The problem that is arising with all these different auditing mechanisms, reporting, transparency reporting, etc., is that it is a lot of information to collect all this manually. So we are currently talking to a few potential partners, including the talented team that is building the MIPS portal to automate the data extraction of this. And so we also have internal data scientists working on this. So yeah, not everyone may notice, but mips.maker.com already has a quite advanced data extraction compiler. So it compiles the information from the MIPS GitHub repositories, and it extracts information such as core units, who are the core units, core unit facilitators. And we want to add to that. So the wallet setups that we have currently manually documented, we want that in a machine readable format so that can be extracted. And the same for the budget. The tables are there, the data is there, but with a little bit more effort, we can make this machine readable and extract it into a database representation of the DAO. And we want to push that even further with other structured information. So make the MIPS a hybrid of human readable, but also machine readable information, and yeah, which would lead to a lot more up-to-date information, consistency, etc. We want to include workforce statistics, so the FTEs that I was talking about, the activity indicators. We want to do, what currently already happens a little bit with the MIPS. We want to do the same with the monthly budget statements, so capture all that information and make it machine processable. Same for the audit reports, and then ultimately also the kind of content that is discussed in the coordination meetings. So add roadmaps and other output and work indicators to that same database, so that we really get this full overview of everything that's going on in the DAO with a lot of meta information that basically allows us to slice all this up. The benefits, I think, are pretty obvious. So it will reduce the manual work, which means that all this information will actually be up to date. This can be input for information dashboards that can aggregate and summarize the information. And then we, of course, want to use that to run certain automated audit checks. So, for example, you could check whether the actual expenses on the blockchain are in line with the budget caps that are defined in the budget MIPS. You could check whether the multi-sigs are set up in the way that is described in the budget MIPS. Yeah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the different initiatives that are currently going on to improve transparency, quality control, and automation in the DAO. And that was it.
All right, yeah, thank you for sharing that, Walter. I think you may have to skip on questions given the time, unless anyone has something very urgent and relevant. Otherwise, I'd encourage people to sort of, well, so you plan to post this in the forum, I guess, or links to this anyway.
Yeah, well, the slides that I've added to this presentation, will collect them and post them as a separate forum thread.
Yeah, they're also actually posted already. People can access these slides live even before the call. So keep that in mind for future joiners, anybody who's here. You could check these slides out. They're usually updated right before the call, but all of this stuff is actually currently available on the GNR Agenda forum post.
Yeah, and the slides will be also on the snippets in about ETA 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay, so maybe once we have a forum thread with this on, we can continue the discussion there.
Yeah, I'm happy to come on again next week, that on time to take any questions or comments.
Yeah, we can maybe swim back to next week for sure. All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll hopefully see you all again soon. Thanks everyone.